The first time Kang Minji truly saw Dora Williams, she was crying in his grandmother's bathroom, trying to rewrap a bandage that kept slipping from her swollen cheekbone. It was a Thursday afternoon, 6 months into her assignment as his grandmother's hospice nurse. 6 months of careful invisibility, of arriving at 2 o'clock when he was always at business meetings, of providing gentle care to the dying woman while avoiding the dangerous grandson who paid the bills. But today, everything had gone wrong. The therapy center had called about late payments. Derek had shown up at her apartment the night before, leaving bruises and threats. And Dora had broken down in the one place she thought was private. Not knowing that for the first time in 6 months, Kang Minji had come home early. His grandmother had called, her voice thin and tired in a way that made his chest tighten, asking if he could come see her. Time, the oncologist had said 3 months into Dora's care, was no longer a luxury they possessed. So Minji came home at 2 in the afternoon, expensive shoes silent on marble floors, and heard the quiet sobbing coming from the hallway bathroom. His first instinct was to leave, to give whoever it was their privacy. His world didn't allow for vulnerability, didn't make space for tears. Then he heard her voice, low and shaking, talking to someone on the phone. "I know the payment's late. I'm so sorry. I have half of it now and I can get the rest by next week. I promise. Please don't drop him from the program. He needs this. He needs consistency and I can't." Her voice cracked. "I can't let him lose another thing he loves." Minji stopped walking. In 6 months, he'd never heard his grandmother's nurse speak beyond professional pleasantries left in notes or brief exchanges when schedules accidentally overlapped. Something in her desperation reached through the walls he'd built, grabbed hold of something he thought he'd killed years ago. "Please, just 1 more week. I'm begging you." The bathroom door was cracked open. Through the gap, Minji saw her, the woman his grandmother mentioned constantly in their evening phone calls, the nurse who made Halmiani laugh and brought flowers and sang old songs. She stood at the sink, phone pressed to her ear with one hand, while the other tried to secure a bandage across her left cheekbone. The skin around it was swollen, mottled with bruising that spread from her cheekbone to her jaw, deep purple against warm brown skin. She wasn't old, maybe late 20s, with her hair pulled back in a practical bun that revealed the graceful line of her neck. Even crying, even hurt, she was beautiful in a way that made Minji's breath catch. Not the polished, artificial beauty of the women who circulated through his world, but something real and unguarded. "Thank you," she whispered into the phone. "Thank you so much. I'll have it, I swear." She hung up and braced both hands on the sink, head dropping forward as fresh tears fell. Then she took a long, shuddering breath, straightened her spine, and wiped her face with careful precision. Minji watched her compose herself, watched her transform the devastation back into professional calm. She adjusted her scrubs, checked her reflection, practiced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. When she finally turned toward the door, Minji had already stepped back into the hallway, giving her the illusion that he'd just arrived. Their eyes met. Hers went wide, then immediately dropped. "Mr. Kang, I'm so sorry, I'll get back to your grandmother right now." She moved to slip past him, but Minji stepped into her path, not touching her, just occupying the space in a way that made her stop. "What happened to your face?" It wasn't a question. Minji didn't ask questions when he already knew he wouldn't accept evasion as an answer. Dora's hand flew to her cheek, covering the bandage as if she could make it disappear. "Nothing, I'm fine. Just clumsy." He studied her for a long moment, noting the way she wouldn't meet his eyes, the defensive set of her shoulders, the slight trembling in her fingers. In his line of work, Minji had learned to read people the way others read books. Fear had a particular flavor, and this woman was afraid, but not of him. "You're lying. Mr. Kang, with respect, my personal business isn't your concern. I'm here to care for your grandmother, and I promise this doesn't affect my ability to do my job." Her voice was steady despite the tears still drying on her cheeks, and Minji found himself oddly impressed. Most people crumbled under his attention. This woman met it head-on even while clearly falling apart. He should let it go. Should step aside and let her return to his grandmother's room. He had enough complications in his life without adding whatever tragedy this stranger carried. But something about the desperation in her voice on that phone call, the practiced way she'd hidden her pain, the fact that she was begging for money for someone she loved while standing in his home with injuries she refused to explain, all of it scraped against something raw inside him. Come with me. Minji turned and walked toward the kitchen, not looking back to see if she followed. He heard her hesitate, heard the soft exhale of resignation, then footsteps behind him. The kitchen was all clean lines and expensive appliances, mostly unused. Minji pulled out a chair at the island. Sit. Mr. Kang, I really should check on your grandmother. She'll be waking from her nap soon and she needs her medication. Halmiani is fine. Sit. Dora remained standing, chin lifted in quiet defiance that made something warm unfurl in Minji's chest. Fine. Then I'll sit. He lowered himself into the chair he'd pulled out for her, leaving her standing awkwardly beside him. It was a negotiation tactic he'd used 1,000 times, making the other person uncomfortable until they conceded. Usually it worked within seconds. Dora Williams apparently wasn't usual. She crossed her arms and waited, and Minji felt the corner of his mouth twitch with something that might have been amusement if he remembered how to feel amused. You're stubborn. It's kept me alive this long. There was a story in those words, something dark and survivor sharp. Minji recognized it because he wore the same story in different scars. He stood, moved to the freezer and pulled out an ice pack. When he turned back, Dora was watching him with wary confusion. For your face. The bandage isn't helping with the swelling. He approached slowly, the way someone might approach a wounded animal, and held out the ice pack. Dora stared at it like it might bite her. I don't need your help. Everyone needs help sometimes. Not from strangers. We're not strangers. You've worked in my home for 6 months. You care for the most important person in my life. Halmiani talks about you every time we speak. That makes us something. What does it make us? It was barely a question, more of a challenge, and Minji found himself leaning against the counter, studying this woman who refused to be managed or intimidated or helped. I don't know yet. The honesty surprised them both. Minji didn't do uncertainty. His entire existence was built on knowing exactly what he wanted and taking it with surgical precision. But something about Dora Williams made him feel off balance in a way that should have been uncomfortable and instead felt almost exhilarating. Your grandmother talks about you constantly, Dora said finally, changing the subject with obvious intent. She's very proud. Says you built an empire from nothing. Halmiani exaggerates. Does she? Dora's eyes met his fully for the first time since he'd started really looking at her. And Minji felt the impact of that gaze like a physical thing. Because she also says you're dangerous. That people fear you. That you've done things she prays to ancestors to forgive. Minji went very still. And what do you think? I think your grandmother loves you anyway. I think that means something. What does it mean? That maybe the dangerous things you've done came from trying to protect what you love. Dora's voice softened. I understand that better than you might think. The person you were on the phone with. The payment you're worried about. Who is it for? He watched her face shudder. Watched the walls go up brick by brick until she was closed off again. Someone I love. A child. It wasn't a guess. The desperation in her voice had been parental, primal. Minji had heard that particular flavor of fear before, usually in men begging for their families' lives. Dora's jaw tightened. My son. He's 8. He has autism and he's in a special therapy program that costs more than I make in 3 jobs. But it's helping him and I can't. Her voice fractured at the edges. I can't let him lose it. And the injury. Did your son do this? The question was gentle, but Dora flinched anyway. No. Yes. Not the way you're thinking. She pressed fingers to her temples like her head hurt. He had a meltdown in the grocery store 2 days ago. Sensory overload. Too many sounds and lights and people staring. When I tried to help him, tried to apply the pressure therapy he needs, he was flailing and his elbow caught my face. It was an accident. Minji processed this information with the same analytical precision he applied to everything. But you're hiding it like it wasn't an accident. Because people don't understand. They see a bruise on my face and they see abuse. They see my beautiful boy struggling and they see a problem that needs to be fixed or removed. She laughed, bitter and tired. His father saw a broken kid he didn't want and left when David was 3. The world sees a single black mother with a special needs child and makes assumptions about my fitness, my capabilities, my worth. The ice pack was melting in Minji's hand, cold water dripping onto expensive marble. He set it down carefully because his fingers had clenched around it hard enough to hurt. The payment you're late on. How much? Dora's eyes narrowed. How much? $3,000. Minji pulled out his phone. No. Dora moved faster than he expected, her hand covering his screen. No, absolutely not. It's just money. It's not just money. It's my son. It's my responsibility. She was breathing hard now, standing close enough that Minji could smell her shampoo. Something clean and simple that probably came from a drugstore. I didn't tell you that story so you'd fix it. I don't need rescuing. Then why did you tell me? The question hung between them, and Minji watched Dora struggle with the answer. Because, she finally whispered, your grandmother asked me yesterday why I looked sad. And when I said I was fine, she told me that fine was just another way of saying I'm drowning, but I'll drown quietly so I don't bother anyone. She said you used to say you were fine all the time before you learned that strength isn't the same as silence. Halmiani talks too much. She talks exactly enough. Dora stepped back, putting professional distance between them again. And she's probably awake now wondering where I am. She turned to leave, but Minji's voice stopped her. Dora. She paused, didn't turn around. This conversation isn't over. It has to be. Because whatever you're thinking, whatever you're planning, I can't afford it. Not the money and not the complication. My life is simple because simple is safe. Simple keeps David protected. What if simple is just another word for surviving instead of living? Dora looked back over her shoulder, and her eyes were impossibly sad. Then I'll survive. It's what I'm good at. She left, and Minji stood in his kitchen surrounded by luxury he barely noticed, holding a melting ice pack and feeling like something fundamental had shifted in his carefully controlled world. He pulled out his phone and made a call. The voice on the other end answered in Korean. Hyungnim, I need information on someone. Dora Williams, late 20s, African-American, works for Gentle Hands Hospice Care. She has an 8-year-old son named David with special needs. I want to know everything. Her financial situation, her housing, her employment history, any legal issues. Should I be concerned about a threat? No. Minji's grip tightened on the phone. I need to know how to help her without her knowing I'm helping. There was a pause, surprise evident even in silence. Hyungnim, that's not usually how we operate. I'm aware. Just do it. He hung up and walked to his grandmother's room, where he could hear Dora's voice, soft and melodic, reading something in English. He stood in the doorway unnoticed, watching her sit beside his grandmother's bed, book in her lap, one hand holding his Halmiani's frail fingers. His grandmother's eyes were closed, but she was smiling, and when Dora paused in her reading, the old woman spoke in heavily accented English. Beautiful voice. Reminds me of when I was young, when Seoul had singers in cafes before war took the music away. Your English is getting better, Mrs. Kang. You help me practice. You have patience. Halmiani opened her eyes, sharp despite her illness. My grandson, he noticed you finally. It wasn't a question, and Dora's cheeks darkened with a flush that Minji found fascinating. He noticed I was in the bathroom when I should have been working. He noticed you're hurt. Halmiani squeezed her hand. And now he will try to fix it because he thinks money solves everything. Money solves most things. Not lonely. Not guilt. Not love. The old woman's eyes found Minji in the doorway. Isn't that right, Minjia? He stepped into the room, hands in his pockets, playing it casual when he felt anything but. Halmiani, you should rest instead of philosophizing. Rest is for when I'm dead. Now I say what I think. His grandmother looked between them with obvious satisfaction. You two finally talking properly. Good. I was worried I'd die before you found someone real. Mrs. Kang. Dora's voice was mortified. Please don't, he's not. Minji found himself speaking before he thought better of it. What am I not? Dora stood abruptly. I should get your grandmother's medication. She fled, and Hermione laughed. The sound papery but genuine. That one has fire under all that careful. That one has a complicated life and doesn't need me making it more complicated. His grandmother reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. You've spent 15 years making everything complicated, building walls and empires in distance. Maybe it's time to make something simple. There's nothing simple about her. Good. Simple would bore you in a week. Hermione's eyes grew serious. She's drowning, that one. I see it. And you, my angry boy who thinks violence is protection, you could teach her to swim. Or she could teach you it's okay to stop fighting long enough to float. Minji sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle her. I don't know how to do this, Hermione. How to be around someone like her without destroying it. Then learn. His grandmother cupped his face with one shaking hand, thumb brushing over the small flower tattoo on his neck, the one he'd gotten after she survived her first round of cancer. A cherry blossom, for resilience and beauty in short life. You put this here because I told you even hard men can bloom. Maybe now you show her how. What if I make it worse? What if I'm too much of what I am to be what she needs? His grandmother smiled. Then you let her decide that. Stop choosing for other people what they can handle. That girl handles more before breakfast than most people handle in a lifetime. Dora returned with medication and water, her professional mask back in place. But Minji caught the way her eyes flickered to him, the way her hands trembled slightly as she helped his grandmother sit up. After Hermione took her pills and settled back into sleep, Dora began gathering her things to leave. Minji followed her to the door. I'm having food delivered tonight. Japanese from the place on Sawtell. There will be extra. Mr. Kang, I can't. It's going to waste otherwise. Come back at 7. Bring your son. The words were out before he could stop them, surprising himself as much as her. Dora turned slowly. Because my grandmother is right. We should talk properly. And I'd like to meet David. That's not appropriate. Why not? You've been caring for my grandmother for 6 months. You've heard her entire life story. You know mine through her. Why is it inappropriate for me to know yours? Because you're... She gestured at him helplessly. You're Kang Minji. And you're Dora Williams. Minji stepped closer, not invading her space but closing the distance enough that his next words were just for her. I notice everything in my space, Dora. 6 months ago you started bringing flowers. Cheap bodega flowers that you arrange in my kitchen when you think I won't see. You reorganize my books by color instead of alphabetically because you think it looks better. You leave the windows open exactly 3 inches because you figured out I like fresh air but hate wind. Her throat tightened. She thought herself invisible during those early morning shifts when he was supposedly sleeping. You hum when you work, he continued. Old soul songs. Your grandmother's favorites, I think, because sometimes you sing words about going home to Louisiana. He tilted his head. You're not just my grandmother's nurse. You're someone I'd like to know. Amara couldn't breathe. Mr. Kang. 7 o'clock, Dora. Let me meet David. Let me see what you're fighting for. And if I say no, then I'll respect it. He would too. For all his power, all his ability to make things happen through force of will or money or carefully applied pressure, Minji knew some things couldn't be taken. They had to be given. But I hope you'll say yes. Dora studied his face for a long moment, searching for something he hoped she found. Finally, quietly, she answered. He doesn't like new places. New people make him anxious. If he gets overwhelmed, we'll have to leave immediately. Done. And this isn't a date. Definitely not a date. And you're not trying to fix my problems. I'm trying to understand them. Dora's shoulders lowered slightly, some of the tension bleeding out. Because Minji said honestly, in the 6 months you've been caring for my grandmother, You're the first person who made her laugh until she cried telling stories about her childhood. You're the first person who didn't treat her like she was already gone. And because when you thought you were alone, you begged and cried and broke for your son, then put yourself back together and smiled. That kind of strength deserves to be witnessed, deserves to be supported. Her eyes shone with tears she wouldn't let fall. You don't know me. No, but I'd like to. The elevator chimed its arrival. Dora stepped inside, turned to face him. 7 o'clock. We'll try. But Minji, if David is uncomfortable, if this is too much, we leave. I understand. He put his hand against the elevator door, keeping it open. And Dora, thank you for trusting me with this. I haven't decided if I trust you yet. Fair enough. The doors closed between them, and Minji stood in the empty hallway of his empty penthouse, feeling more alive than he had in 15 years. He made another call. The same voice answered. Hyungnim, cancel that background check. Sir, I said cancel it. If I want to know about Dora Williams, I'll ask her myself. But I need you to do something else. Find out which therapy program her son is in. Pay the balance anonymously. Set up an account that covers it for the next 5 years. Hyungnim, that's not. I know it's not how we operate. Do it anyway. And if she finds out it was me, you're fired. Understood. Minji hung up and went to his grandmother's room. She was awake again, watching him with knowing eyes. You invited them for dinner. I did. Good boy. Now go make sure your home isn't too intimidating. That child will need quiet spaces. Soft lights. Maybe music that doesn't assault the senses. How do you know what he'll need? Because I pay attention. And because that mother loves him the way I loved you, fiercely enough to break the world if it threatened him. Halmini smiled. Go prepare, Minjia. Tonight you learn that some things worth having require gentleness instead of force. Minji spent the next 4 hours transforming his penthouse. He dimmed lights, moved sharp objects, researched autism and sensory processing on his phone with the same intensity he usually reserved for business competitors. At 6:45, he was as nervous as he'd ever been walking into a negotiation with rival gangs. At 6:57, the elevator chimed. Minji straightened his shirt, touched the flower tattoo on his neck for luck, and went to meet the woman and child who would change everything he thought he knew about strength, family, and what it meant to finally, truly be seen. The doors opened, and there stood Dora Williams in a simple dress that made her beautiful brown skin glow, holding the hand of a small boy with dark eyes that saw everything and trusted nothing. Hello, Minji said softly, crouching to the boy's level without approaching. You must be David. I'm very glad you're here. The boy didn't respond, didn't even look at him, but his grip on his mother's hand tightened. And Minji realized that earning the trust of Dora Williams and her son wouldn't be a battle he could win with power or money or influence. It would be something far more terrifying. It would require his heart. Dora watched Minji lower himself to David's eye level, watched him keep his distance, watched him wait without expectation, and something in her chest cracked open just slightly. Most people approached David wrong. They got too close, spoke too loud, touched without permission, demanded eye contact and interaction he couldn't give. They treated his silence like rudeness, his stimming like something to correct, his differentness like a problem requiring their solution. Minji did none of these things. He simply stayed crouched, hands loose at his sides, voice low and even. Your mom told me you like things organized. I have a library here with books that need arranging. No pressure, but if you want to look at them later, they're yours to organize however makes sense to you. David's eyes flickered toward the sound of his voice but didn't land on Minji's face. His free hand moved to his mouth, fingers tapping his lips in the rhythm that soothed him. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. Minji noticed. Dora saw him notice. But he didn't comment, didn't try to stop it, didn't even react. He just stood slowly and stepped back, giving David space. Come in, please. The food should arrive in about 10 minutes. The penthouse stretched before them, all clean lines and expensive emptiness. But Dora noticed immediately that something was different from this afternoon. The lighting was softer, warmer. The floor-to-ceiling windows had their shades drawn halfway, filtering the Los Angeles sunset into something gentle. And from somewhere came the faint sound of instrumental music, piano notes that fell like rain. No sudden changes or jarring chords. "You changed things," she said quietly. Minji's hand went to the back of his neck, rubbing there like he was embarrassed. "I did some reading about sensory processing. I hoped it might be more comfortable this way." David had stopped in the entryway, not moving forward but not pulling backward either. His eyes scanned the space in the methodical way he examined every new environment, cataloging details most people missed. Dora knelt beside her son. "Baby, Mr. Kang has invited us for dinner. We can stay as long as you're comfortable, and we can leave whenever you need to." She pulled a small fidget toy from her purse, the weighted one David preferred. "Your comfort item just in case." David took it, rolled it between his palms with practiced precision. Then, to Dora's surprise, he took 3 steps forward into the penthouse. It was progress. Small, but everything with David was small measured steps that meant the world. Minji led them through the living area toward the dining space, but he paused at a doorway Dora hadn't noticed before. "I also prepared this if David needs it." He opened the door to reveal what must have been a study. But the desk had been moved to one side, and the center of the room now held cushions on the floor, soft blankets, a small tent made from sheer fabric that created a cave-like space without being confining. In the corner, a speaker played that same gentle piano music. "A quiet room," Minji explained. "No pressure to use it, but it's here if he gets overwhelmed." The lights dim all the way down, and the door locks from the inside so he'd have complete control of the space. Dora's throat tightened. "You did this afternoon." "I made calls. People moved quickly." She shook her head slowly. "This must have cost." "Don't." Minji's voice was firm but not unkind. "Please don't calculate the cost. It's just a room. If it helps, it's worth it. If it doesn't, I'll change it." David had moved to the doorway, peering inside with cautious interest. He didn't enter, but he looked, and that was something. The elevator chimed with the food delivery. Minji excused himself to get it, and Dora took the opportunity to text her neighbor who'd agreed to be on call in case she needed to come home suddenly. "We're okay so far. He's doing well." Her neighbor, Mrs. Chun, a 70-year-old Chinese woman who adored David, texted back immediately. "Good. That man better treat you right or he answers to me." Dora smiled despite her nerves. Mrs. Chun was 4 feet 11 and fierce as a dragon. Minji returned with bags of food, and they moved to the dining table. He'd said it simply, no overwhelming place settings or unnecessary decoration. Just plates, chopsticks, and Western utensils in case David preferred them. "I wasn't sure what David likes," Minji said as he unpacked containers, "so I ordered variety. Teriyaki chicken, plain rice, California rolls, udon noodles, some tempura vegetables. All mild. Nothing too spicy or strong flavored. He likes plain rice and chicken," Dora offered. "Separate, not touching on the plate." Minji nodded and prepared a plate exactly that way, sliding it to the spot where David had cautiously settled into a chair. He'd chosen the seat against the wall where he could see all the exits. Exactly what Dora expected. Her son stared at the plate, then picked up his fork, the Western utensil more familiar, and took a small bite of rice. He chewed methodically, considering, then took another bite. Success. Dora felt her shoulders drop from somewhere around her ears. The first test passed. Minji served her next, then himself, and they ate in comfortable quiet. Not the awkward silence of strangers, but something easier. He didn't try to force conversation, didn't pepper David with questions the boy couldn't or wouldn't answer, didn't treat the quiet like something that needed filling. Instead, he asked Dora about her day, about the other patients she visited, about how she'd gotten into hospice care. She found herself talking more than she'd intended, telling him about her grandmother in Louisiana who died when Dora was 16, how she'd wished for someone to make those final months gentler for the woman who'd raised her. "So you give other people's grandmothers what you wanted yours to have," Minji said softly. "I try. Halmini is lucky to have you." I'm lucky to have her. Dora smiled, thinking of the fierce old woman who told outrageous stories and made Dora laugh even while dying. She's remarkable. The way she talks about you, about your childhood and soul, about immigrating here and building a life from nothing. She leaves out the hard parts. She mentions them. Dora met his eyes. But she focuses on who you became despite them. Or maybe because of them. Minji's jaw tightened. What I became isn't always something to be proud of. She says you protected her, provided for her, made sure she never went without, even when you were barely more than a child yourself. I did what was necessary. That's what I tell myself, too, Dora said quietly. When I'm working 3 jobs and barely see David awake some days. When I'm choosing between his therapy and keeping the heat on. I did what was necessary. But it doesn't always feel like enough. It's more than enough. You're more than enough. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was ready to examine too closely. David had finished eating and begun his post-meal routine, lining up his fork and knife parallel on the edge of his plate, adjusting until they were perfectly aligned. Minji watched with what looked like fascination rather than judgment. He likes order, Dora explained unnecessarily. Order makes sense. Chaos is harder to navigate. Minji stood and began clearing plates. I have a library like I mentioned. Would you like to see it, David? The boy didn't respond verbally, but he slid off his chair and took 3 steps toward Minji, which was answer enough. They moved down another hallway to a room-lined floor to ceiling with books. Not the decorator kind, carefully arranged for aesthetics, but actual books with creased spines and bookmarks and the lived-in feeling of being read. Most were in Korean, some in English, covering everything from philosophy to history to what looked like poetry. David's eyes went wide. He moved to the nearest shelf and began examining the books with his careful, methodical attention. They're not organized at all, Minji admitted. I buy them and shove them wherever they fit. But if you wanted to arrange them, by size or color or however makes sense to you, I'd be grateful. It was brilliant. Not asking David to engage socially, not demanding conversation or eye contact, but offering a task that played to his strengths and gave him control. David pulled a book from the shelf, examined it, placed it back, pulled another, studied the spine, added it to a small stack he was forming on the floor. He'll probably do this for a while, Dora said softly. That's fine. There's no rush. Minji gestured for Dora to follow him back to the living area, leaving David in the library where they could still see him but giving him space to work. They settled on the couch, careful distance between them. Thank you, Dora said, for understanding what he needs. Most people don't. Most people are idiots. She laughed, surprised by his bluntness. That's harsh, but accurate. Minji turned slightly to face her. I meant what I said earlier, about wanting to understand your life, what you're fighting for. You've been coming here for 6 months and I barely knew you existed beyond the care you gave Halmiani. That was my failure, not yours. You're a busy man. I'm a man who was too busy to notice something important. He paused. Someone important. Dora's breath caught. Mr. Kang. Minji. Please. We've moved past Mr. Kang. Minji, then. She folded her hands in her lap. Why now? Why suddenly notice me after 6 months? Because I finally came home when you were here. Because I heard you breaking and watched you put yourself back together. Because his voice dropped. I've been living half asleep for 15 years and you woke me up. That's a lot of weight to put on a stranger. Are we strangers? You know my grandmother's stories. You've seen my home, my books, the parts of me I show to almost no one. I know you hum when you work and bring flowers and rearrange things to make them beautiful. We're not strangers, Dora. We're just people who haven't talked enough yet. She wanted to argue, to maintain the professional distance that had kept her safe for 6 months. But sitting in his space, watching her son peacefully organize books in the next room, feeling seen for the first time in longer than she could remember, the arguments died on her tongue. Tell me about David, Minji said gently. Not the diagnosis or the challenges. Tell me about who he is. So she did. Told him about David's love of patterns, his incredible memory, the way he could spend hours organizing things by systems only he understood. Told him about the rare smiles that lit up the world, about how David communicated through actions instead of words, about his gentleness with animals and his fascination with how things worked. "He sounds extraordinary," Minji said when she finished. "He is." Her voice caught. "But the world doesn't see it. They see different. See difficult. His father," she stopped, swallowed hard. "Derek left when David was 3. Said he didn't sign up for a broken kid. Said I should have known something was wrong during pregnancy. Should have done something about it. There's nothing wrong with David. I know that. You know that. But Derek and so many others, they don't. Then they're fools who don't deserve to know him." Minji's voice was fierce. "Your son is organizing my entire library based on some system I'm sure makes perfect sense. He's creating order from chaos. That's not broken. That's brilliant." Dora felt tears slide down her cheeks. "Thank you for saying that. I'm not just saying it. I mean it." He shifted slightly closer. "Dora, I don't know much about autism or sensory processing or the challenges you face daily. But I know strength when I see it. I know love when I see it. And what you're doing, raising David alone, working yourself to exhaustion to give him what he needs, fighting a world that won't make space for him, that's the kind of strength I've only seen in soldiers and survivors. I don't feel strong. I feel tired. Strength and exhaustion aren't mutually exclusive." Minji's hand moved like he might reach for hers, then stopped, hovering. "Can I ask about the injury? The real story?" Dora debated, deflecting. Then decided this man who opened his home and rearranged his space and met her son with such care deserved honesty. "Derek found out where we live. Showed up 3 nights ago demanding to see David, demanding I give him money for child support he never paid, claiming he had rights. When I refused, when I told him he gave up his rights when he walked away, he grabbed me." She touched her cheek. "This was from his ring when I pulled away. Where is he now? Gone. I threatened to call the police and he left. But Minji," she turned to face him fully, "he's been making noises about wanting custody. About how I work too much, can't provide stability, how David would be better off with him and his new wife who can be home full-time." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Minji's expression went cold and flat, the crime boss showing through the careful civility. "Over my dead body." The words were said with such cold finality that Dora actually shivered. "That's not your battle." Minji's eyes met hers, and they were absolutely uncompromising. "You're telling me some man who abandoned his son wants to take him now for what? Benefits and control. Wants to take your boy from the only parent who's actually loved him. And you think I'm gonna sit back and let that happen? Minji, you can't just..." "Can't what?" He stood, paced to the window the predator barely contained. "Can't protect people I care about. Can't use the resources I have to make sure that beautiful boy in there doesn't get traumatized by a system that would consider giving him to a stranger just because that stranger shares DNA. Can't make sure you're safe from a man who puts his hands on you. I won't have you do something illegal. I won't risk. I won't do anything illegal," Minji interrupted, turning to face her. "But I will make sure Derek understands that pursuing custody would be a very, very bad idea. I will make sure you have legal representation that he can't afford to fight. I will make sure every resource you need is available. That's just money solving problems again. No, that's me using everything I have to protect what matters. There's a difference." Dora stood, crossed to where he stood rigid with barely controlled fury. She didn't touch him, not yet, but she held his gaze. "I need to know this isn't you trying to save the poor broken single mother. I need to know that when you look at me, you see an equal, not a project. When I look at you," Minji said quietly, "I see someone stronger than anyone I've ever met. I see someone who's survived what should have broken her and turned it into love instead of bitterness. I see someone who makes me want to be soft when I've been hard so long I forgot what soft felt like." He paused, searching for words. "You're not a project, Dora. You're someone I want to know. Someone I already care about more than I should after one real conversation. That's fast." "It is. But I don't do anything slowly. When I commit completely. We barely know each other. Then let me know you." Let me be here. Let me help. The word came out broken. Why would you want this, the complication? Because Minji's hand finally closed the distance, fingers brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness. I've spent 15 years building walls and you walked past all of them without even trying. Because when I watch you with David, I see the kind of love that makes me believe in something beyond survival. Because you make me want to be the man my grandmother thinks I am instead of the man I've had to be. That's a lot of pressure. So say no. Tell me this is too fast, too much, too complicated. Tell me to back off and I will. Dora should say exactly that. Should protect herself and David from the inevitable heartbreak of wanting something this big, this impossible. Should remember that men like Kang Minji didn't end up with women like her outside of fairy tales. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, what if he never accepts you? What if David can't handle someone new in our life permanently? What if I let you in and it's too much for him? Then we go slow. We follow his pace. We build trust the way he needs it built, brick by brick, day by day. Minji's eyes held hers. I'm not Derek, Dora. I don't walk away when things get hard. My whole life has been hard, and I'm still here. David appeared in the doorway, 3 books in his arms. He walked to the couch and set them on the coffee table in front of Minji, perfectly aligned, spines facing out. Minji looked at them, then at David. Are these for me? The boy didn't answer, didn't look at him, but he patted the top book twice. A gesture. Communication in his language. Dora's breath caught. David was sharing, offering something of value from the organizational work that soothed him. Minji seemed to understand the significance. He picked up the first book carefully, examined it. Korean poetry. Good choice. Thank you, David. 3 taps to his lips. 3 taps. Then David turned and went back to the library. He likes you, Dora whispered. That's his way of saying so. I'm honored. They sat in comfortable silence, Minji paging through the poetry book David had chosen while Dora watched her son through the doorway, watched him create order from chaos, watched him exist in a space that someone had made safe for him. Her phone buzzed. Mrs. Chun checking in. Dora texted back that they were fine, that they'd be home soon. It's getting late, she said reluctantly. I should get David home. School tomorrow. Of course. Minji stood. But Dora, before you go. He pulled a card from his wallet. This is my personal number. Not business. If Derek shows up again, if you need anything, call me. Anytime. She took the card, their fingers brushing. I can't promise I'll call. I'm not asking for promises. Just possibilities. They collected David from the library. He'd organized an entire wall of books by a system Minji couldn't quite decipher, but that clearly made perfect sense. The boy looked at his work with satisfaction, then allowed Dora to take his hand. At the elevator, Minji crouched to David's level one more time. Thank you for organizing my books. You're welcome here anytime to work on them. No pressure, just an open invitation. David didn't respond, but he looked in Minji's direction for half a second, which was progress. In the car service Minji had arranged to take them home, Dora held her son and thought about the evening. About a man who'd researched autism in 4 hours, who'd created a sensory-friendly space, who'd treated David with respect instead of pity. Mama. David's voice was quiet, unexpected. He rarely spoke unprompted. Yes, baby. He tapped her arm 3 times. His sign for good, for safe, for okay. Tears burned her eyes. Yes, honey. It was good. That night, after David was asleep, Dora stared at Minji's card for a long time before programming the number into her phone. She didn't call, didn't text, but having it there felt like possibility, and possibility was something she'd forgotten how to want. Over the next 3 weeks, something shifted. Minji started coming home earlier on Thursdays, timing it to when Dora was there with his grandmother. They'd talk while she worked, conversations that ranged from shallow to profound, learning each other in careful increments. He asked about David constantly, about his therapy, his progress, his interests, sent Dora articles about autism research with no commentary, just information offered freely. Never pushed, never demanded, just showed consistent interest. Halmiani noticed, of course. Watched them orbit each other with obvious satisfaction. "You're going to marry that girl," she told Minji in Korean one evening after Dora had left. "Halmiani, that's premature. Is it? You look at her the way your grandfather looked at me. Like she's air and you're learning to breathe." Minji couldn't deny it. In 3 weeks, Dora Williams had become the axis his world turned on. He thought about her constantly, worried about her safety, wanted to know everything about her days. The background check had revealed what he'd suspected. Crushing debt, 3 jobs, an apartment in a dangerous neighborhood, an ex-husband with a history of violence, and a pending custody claim that looked disturbingly viable given the right lawyer and the wrong judge. Minji had made calls, quiet ones. Derek Williams now had legal troubles of his own, the kind that made custody claims complicated. Nothing illegal, just information brought to the right authorities' attention. Traffic violations that became warrants. Unpaid child support to another child from another relationship suddenly being enforced. A pattern of behavior documented and filed. Dora didn't know, didn't need to know. Minji would tell her eventually, when the threat was completely neutralized. For now, he just kept showing up, kept being present, kept proving he wasn't going anywhere. On the 4th Thursday, Dora arrived with David. Minji's heart actually stuttered seeing the boy again. "He's had a half day at school," Dora explained. "My other client canceled and I couldn't find a sitter." "I'm sorry. I know this is your grandmother's time." "Nonsense." Halmiani's voice called from her bedroom. "Bring that boy here. I want to meet him properly." So David met Halmiani. The old woman, dying but still sharp, seemed to understand instinctively how to interact with him. She didn't demand eye contact, didn't touch him, just talked softly about when she was young in Korea, about the gardens and the flowers and the careful order of temple life. David listened, rocking slightly in his chair, and when Halmiani finished a story, he arranged the items on her bedside table, organizing them by size and color. "Beautiful," Halmiani said. "You see patterns I miss. Thank you for making my space more beautiful." 3 taps to his lips, the beginning of a smile. Minji watched from the doorway, watched his dying grandmother connect with Dora's son, watched 2 of the most important people in his life find common ground. Dora stood beside him, and without thinking, Minji took her hand. She didn't pull away. Over the next month, it became routine. Thursdays meant all of them together. David would organize Halmiani's room while Dora provided medical care and Minji just existed in their orbit, learning to be still, learning to be present instead of always doing. Halmiani grew weaker. The cancer was winning. They all knew it, even David in his way, who started bringing her flowers from the bodega, cheap and cheerful, arranged just so in cups beside her bed. One Thursday in late autumn, Dora arrived alone. David was on a field trip with school, properly supervised, the first one he'd been able to attend. "You look tired," Minji observed after she'd settled Halmiani for a nap. 3 jobs and a son with limited sleep. "Tired is my default." Minji had been planning this conversation for weeks, had the words prepared, but sitting across from her in his kitchen, watching her try to hide her exhaustion behind professional competence, the planned speech evaporated. "Move in with me." Dora's eyes went wide. "What? You and David? Move in here. The penthouse has space. He'd have his own room, you'd have yours. There's room for the sensory equipment he needs." "Minji, we've known each other 6 weeks. 6 weeks where I've watched you work yourself to exhaustion. 6 weeks of learning about David's needs and how you're barely meeting them not because you're not enough but because the resources aren't there." He leaned forward. "I have resources. Let me help. I'm not a charity case. No, you're someone I care about deeply and I want to take care of you. There's a difference." She stood, paced to the window. "This is insane. Is it? Or is it practical? You're drowning, Dora. You work 3 jobs, barely see David awake, live in a neighborhood where you're afraid to let him play outside. I'm offering a solution. Solutions come with strings. Not this one." Minji stood, moved to where she stared out at Los Angeles. No strings. Separate rooms. You keep your independence, your jobs if you want them, your life. You just live it somewhere safer with someone who wants to support you. Her voice broke. Why would you do this? Because I'm falling for you. He said it simply, honestly. Because in 6 weeks you've become the best part of my days. Because David has taught me more about patience and different kinds of strength than 15 years in my world ever did. Because my grandmother is dying, and when she goes, this place will be empty. But with you here, with David here, it would be home. Tears slid down Dora's cheeks. You don't know what you're asking for. David has hard days, meltdowns, needs that are constant and consuming. Then we handle them together. You'll get tired of it. Of us. Minji turned her to face him, hands gentle on her shoulders. I've built an empire through violence and intimidation. I've survived things that should have killed me. I've walked through fire without flinching. Do you really think an 8-year-old boy's needs are going to make me run? She laughed wetly. When you put it that way. So say yes. 1-month trial. If it doesn't work, if David struggles or you're uncomfortable, we readjust. But Dora, please, let me do this. Let me help. She searched his face for a long moment. You're serious. Completely. And this isn't about, she gestured between them. This isn't expecting anything from me. No expectations beyond letting me be here. If something develops between us, it develops naturally. I'm not trying to buy you, Dora. I'm trying to give David a safe place to grow and you a chance to breathe. Her phone buzzed. A text from the school. David's field trip had gone well. He'd even socialized with another student who shared his interest in organizing rocks by size and color. Dora showed Minji the text, her face soft with love and pride. He deserves more days like this, Minji said quietly. More opportunities to just be a kid without you worrying about money or safety or whether you can afford his next therapy session. You already paid his therapy, didn't you? She said it like she'd suspected for weeks. Minji had the grace to look slightly guilty. Anonymously. Nothing is anonymous when you're Kang Minji. People talk. Are you angry? I should be. She sighed. But I'm too tired to be angry at someone trying to help. Though we will talk about boundaries and my agency. Agreed. So is that a yes to moving in? It's a maybe to thinking about it. I'll take maybe. But over the next 2 weeks, maybe became yes. Dora toured the penthouse properly, imaging David in the space. Minji showed her the room he'd already prepared, sensory-friendly and safe, with space for David's organizational systems and collections. Hermione weighed in naturally. She told Dora in her careful English that Minji had been alone too long, that she'd been praying for someone to make him remember how to live instead of just survive. Your answer to grandmother's prayers, Hermione said, squeezing Dora's hand with surprising strength. No pressure, Dora joked, but her eyes were wet. They moved in on a Saturday. David explored his new room with wide eyes, immediately beginning to organize the books Minji had stocked on shelves. The apartment was theirs to arrange, Minji said. He wanted them to make it home. That first night, after David was asleep in his new room with his comfort items and familiar blankets, Dora found Minji on the balcony. Thank you, she said quietly, for this, for everything. Thank you for trusting me. I'm terrified. So am I. But he smiled. Let's be terrified together. They stood in comfortable silence, looking out at the city, and Dora let herself imagine this could actually work. The first month was adjustment. David had hard days, overwhelming days, days where the new space was too much. But Minji never flinched. He learned David's cues, his triggers, his comfort techniques. He sat with him through meltdowns, gave him space when needed, celebrated small victories. Dora watched this powerful man become gentle, watched him adapt his life around her son's needs without complaint or resentment, watched him prove, day by day, that he meant every promise he'd made. Hermione declined rapidly. Dora provided hospice care with heartbreaking tenderness, and David started spending time in her room daily, organizing her things, bringing flowers, existing in quiet companionship that needed no words. When Hermione died on a quiet Tuesday morning, David was holding one hand and Dora the other. Minji stood at the foot of the bed, tears sliding silently down his face. "She's free now," Dora said softly. "No more pain." David hummed, that sound of understanding, and placed his head on Hermione's shoulder for a moment. "Goodbye," he whispered, one of the few words he offered freely. Minji broke. Dora held him while he sobbed. This man who'd shown only control and strength now shattered with grief. David came to stand beside them, and in his way offered comfort. He leaned against Minji's side, solid and present. They grieved together, three people bound by loss and love. The funeral was small. Minji's associates from Koreatown, some of Hermione's friends from the Korean church, Dora's neighbor Mrs. Chan, and David. The boy wore his noise-canceling headphones but stayed through the service, watching as they honored Hermione's life. Afterward, back at the penthouse that felt emptier without her presence, Minji found Dora in the kitchen. "She would have been happy," he said, "knowing we're here together, knowing David has a safe place." "We should talk," Dora said, turning to face him. "About what this is, what we are. What do you want us to be?" She stepped closer. "I want to stop pretending this is just practical, that I'm here just for David's sake. Because Minji, somewhere in the last 3 months, you became essential. You became home. You are home," he said quietly. "You and David both. You're what I come back to, what I want to protect, what makes me want to be better. So what do we do about it?" This, he cupped her face gently, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he closed the distance and touched his forehead to hers. "We acknowledge what's growing here. We nurture it. We build something real. I'm scared. So am I." But his thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating tenderness. "Let's be scared together." She breathed him in. This man who'd become her safe place, her partner, her unexpected home. 6 months after moving in, Dora stood in the penthouse library watching David read to Minji. The boy still struggled with speech, but he'd started reading aloud in therapy, and he chose to practice with Minji. Minji listened with complete attention, gently correcting pronunciation, praising effort, making David feel brilliant. "My two favorite people," Dora said from the doorway. David looked up and smiled, full and genuine. Minji's eyes found hers, warm and sure. "Come here." She settled on the couch beside them, and Minji's arm came around her shoulders naturally. David leaned against her other side, book in lap, content. This, Dora thought. This is what I'd been fighting for without knowing it existed. A year after moving in, Derek's custody claim was dismissed. The court found him unfit based on a pattern of abandonment and legal issues. Minji sat beside Dora in court, silent support, as the judge ruled in her favor. Outside the courthouse, Dora finally let herself breathe fully. "It's over," she said. "He can't take David. He was never going to take David." Minji's voice was quiet steel. "I would have made sure of that. I know. And I'm choosing not to ask what you did. Probably wise." They picked up David from Mrs. Chen's and told him together that his father couldn't bother them anymore. David didn't fully understand, but he understood safe, understood home, understood that the people around him loved him. That night, after David was asleep, Minji found Dora on the balcony again, their spot for important conversations. "Marry me." She turned, stunned. "What? Not tomorrow. Not next month. But eventually. Marry me and let me spend my life proving you're the best decision I ever made. Let me be David's father legally, not just in practice. Let me be yours completely. Minji. I know it's only been a year. I know by normal standards that's fast. But we've lived a lifetime in this year, Dora. We've grieved, grown, built something real. And I don't want to wait to make it official. You're sure? About us. About David. About all of it. I've never been more sure of anything." His hands framed her face. "You've made me better. Made me softer. Made me remember that strength can be gentle. And David, he's taught me patience, shown me different kinds of brilliance. Made me want to be the kind of man worthy of being his father." She studied his face, saw only honesty there. Only love. Yes, she whispered. Yes. I'll marry you. I'll be yours. We'll be yours. Minji's smile could have lit the city. You've already been mine. This just makes it official. They married quietly 6 months later, in the penthouse with Mrs. Chan and a few close friends as witnesses. David stood between them, holding the rings, seriously performing his duty as ring bearer. When the officiant pronounced them married, David clapped 3 times. His sign for celebration. The next 2 years were adjustment and growth. Minji fully left his criminal enterprises, went completely legitimate. He started community programs in Koreatown, funded schools, became the businessman instead of the crime boss. David thrived. Better therapy, better school, a home environment that supported his needs without pressuring him to be neurotypical. He started speaking more, though he'd never be verbose. But the words he offered were chosen carefully, meant deeply. And one afternoon when Minji was helping him organize a collection of interesting rocks, David looked up and said clearly, "Dad." Minji froze. "What, Dad?" David patted his shoulder 3 times. "Thank you." "For what, buddy?" "Home. Safe. Family." Minji pulled David into a gentle hug, the kind the boy could tolerate from people he trusted completely, and felt tears slide down his face. "You're welcome. Thank you for letting me be your dad." "Love you," David said, the words still emerging slowly but surely. "So much. I love you too, son." Dora found them like that, holding each other, both crying happy tears. She joined them without a word, wrapping her arms around both her boys. 3 years after that first Thursday when Minji noticed a bandage and decided to see past it, they stood together on the balcony. David was 12 now, still navigating his world differently but confidently. Dora had cut back to just hospice work she loved. No more scrambling between 3 jobs. Minji had become a pillar of the community, respected for building instead of destroying. "Happy?" Minji asked, pulling Dora close. "Happier than I knew was possible," she answered honestly. "Good." His hand rested on her stomach, on the small swell that was their next adventure. "This one's going to have your strength and David's brilliance, and your stubborn certainty that love conquers everything." "It does, though." His hand splayed possessive and tender over their growing child. "Love and commitment and showing up every day. That conquers everything." Dora turned in his arms, looked up at the man who'd seen her bruised and broken and decided she was worth protecting. Who'd met her son and decided to love him. Who'd taken her invisible existence and made her central. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for seeing him, for not running when you could have." Minji's thumb traced her lips, his eyes soft in the city lights. "Thank you for letting me stay, for teaching me that the strongest thing I could build wasn't an empire. It was this family." Somewhere inside, David called out that he'd finished organizing dinner ingredients by color and was ready to help cook. Their brilliant, beautiful boy who'd brought them together. And Dora knew, with the same certainty Minji always carried, that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Seen. Loved. Home.